I'm Jay Pitts, a real estate broker, agent, leader, and investor. For the last decade, I've navigated the craziest of real estate markets this country has ever seen, selling over 2,000 homes, moving in and out of markets, always ahead of the curve. And now I'm bringing that perspective to you. This is your resource, and Real Talk About Real Estate starts right now. And we're back, folks. Welcome back to another episode of Resource, Real Talk About Louisville Real Estate. I'm your host, Jay Pitts. Welcome back. I've got a special treat for you today. Talk to you more about that in just a moment. Let's pay the bills real quick. Don't forget, you can find us on all the social media channels, pretty much. Anywhere you get a podcast, anywhere you participate in different social media marketing as a real estate agent, you can find us. You can find us at The Resource Podcast on Facebook, at JTPA Louisville on Twitter, at JPitts Realtor on Instagram, J_Pitts on TikTok. You can find full episodes of the video variety at youtube.com/JPitts Realtor. You can find links to, shows, episodes, snippets in all of those platforms. Not to forget, you can find this podcast anywhere you podcast, but specifically, we would appreciate your support on Apple iTunes or Apple Podcasts. Give us a follow, what have you. I don't even know what they call it anymore. There's a little plus sign in the top right corner of your app. Press that on the resource. We would appreciate you becoming a follower of the podcast. We appreciate 5-star reviews also. Spotify is another big one where people find podcasts. You can find us there as well. All right, now that we got that out of the way, let's go with introduction to a former podcast guest, current real estate agent with me here at JT Pitts and Associates and Remax Premier Properties. The first time we did the podcast, and I'm not even certain what episode it was, but it was very early in season 1. This individual was referred to me by a fellow realtor who was her realtor at the time, someone whose opinion I hold in very high esteem in this industry and their experience. And she basically said, you really need to meet this individual. I was very glad. We had a lot of fun in the last episode. Welcome back, Miss Brenna Brooks.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me again.
Yeah, absolutely, Brenna. So we talked about doing this for a while and, COVID and are we in the office? Are we not in the office? And what are we doing? Is real estate, are we going to be able to show houses tomorrow? That was obviously, a bit of a challenge, but we had a ton of fun, you, Gabe, and I, in our original episode. But let's just reset that for those who didn't scroll back through the archives and have the opportunity to review that yet. It may be where we may see a bump on listens on that episode right after this one airs. But let's reset.
Well, I went back and listened to it yesterday, actually. So yeah, there's already a bump on it.
I checked it out myself. It was so much fun reliving that from a few years ago and hearing the way we spoke about the market and all these things. Anyway, I digress. I won't get too much into it. Talk a little bit more about where you were, what was going on in your life, okay, and what led us to kind of sit down and chat, to talk about real estate the last time around.
Sure. So it was June or July 2018 last time we talked. I was working full-time in an ad agency. I was a project manager. We were working on what ended up being our last flip, actually. And you were following me on Instagram for the house flipping and reached out to Dana and asked if I would be a guest on your podcast. And that is how I met you for the very first time. So yeah, we finished that project. It was almost done at that point. And I was still working in marketing and ad agencies.
Kind of crazy, right? Like I definitely know that was the situation. Patrick, I got recording in my ear. Okay, back at it. I definitely knew that was going on. I had seen you on Instagram, like you said. I saw pictures of your projects. I saw a very unique design sense. I saw what I felt like was a really high quality of work. I saw, a high price point, which is, takes a lot of guts, to be honest, to go into the flipping world and take on very kind of niche markets, your Indian Hills, your Glenview areas, your places like that where people have a high expectation of the product. And to take that sort of financial risk, I thought, okay, well, this person really knows what they're doing. And so I was just intrigued. Obviously, and we talked about on the episode, I flip houses too. And so talking to other people and learning their processes and understanding, there was a bit of a social kind of game that you had going on surrounding your
Yeah.
flip business.
We talked about that. Yeah, we talked about social media and the opportunities it had led me to, and why it was important for me, but not from other people. And that was really interesting to go back and listen to that yesterday, knowing like where I am now and how it got me to where I am now, essentially. So it was really interesting going back and listening to that.
Yeah. Like flippers have tended, in my experience at least, to operate in, the shadows almost a little bit, right? And I don't mean that like they're being sneaky, but like they're not out front. They list with the realtor in most cases, or they list for sale by owner, but there was never, up until that moment, I hadn't seen someone that and I knew that you were partnered with your dad, and that was kind of probably a mixing of skill sets that made that partnership work.
Definitely.
And so, but I hadn't seen anybody step out front and say, hey, I want to have a brand surrounding my flipping business, right? You see it's popular online, you see it's popular, in all these forums, you see flipping popularized on, cable television in multiple facets, right? Show after show after show, these personalities, reality personalities that flip houses. But I hadn't seen anybody locally do it. It was the real estate person like myself who had a brand surrounding their sales, who also did flips, or it was a builder, that built big custom homes, or it was a remodeling company, or it was whatever these things, these businesses. But what I liked about what I saw from you from afar was that it seemed like you understood how to leverage social. It seems
Yeah.
like you learned how to leverage branding.
Well,
And
it helped, honestly. And we talked about this in that episode too, is that the two different jobs, if you will, complemented each other very well, because we talked about flipping being a huge part of it is project management. I would argue that the majority of it is project management. Well, I was a certified project manager working in advertising, and the two very much complemented each other. And there was a lot of, cross learning and cross benefits going on there. And it helped me. So to your point, working for brands in marketing and advertising, and even though I wasn't on the social team and I wasn't on the digital marketing team, being in those review meetings and just picking up things as I went along about brands and social strategies for brands and image and voice and tone and all of these things bled into, and maybe subconsciously carried over into my Instagram for our real estate, for our investing, presence. And
absolutely. And that's a good segue there. Okay, Brenna. So you were working a job,
mhm,
right? A 9 to 5, if you will, right? I don't know if that's what your hours were, but essentially a W-2 employee
yep,
of a firm that worked for big brands, and they had project management needs. You had gotten certifications, some schooling behind that, and it was a very direct career path, right? So, like so many of folks in our age bracket, the like older kind of, you're younger than me, but I'm on the older edge of the
not by
millennial.
much.
Well, I'm on the older edge of the millennial generation, sneak in there by like just a very, very small margin. But, like so many of us, okay, if we work a job, we're either not afraid to be self-employed, or if we work a job, we want a side hustle, right? We want something to help us build wealth. We have something that if we were competitive at anything in our life, and then we settle solidly into adult life, and we kind of get that what was that, successful monotony, is what a
Mhm.
mentor of mine once told me. You're successful, you're not slaying any dragons, right? But you got something worth protecting, and you show up for it every day. But that doesn't always satisfy the competitive energy that you might have
Right.
to climb, to go. If we're not like, wanting to like climb the corporate ladder into like a C-level type position with a large company, like some people lose that. And some people find it in hobbies. Some people find it, in other pursuits. But so many in our age range like to have a side business, right?
Mm-hmm.
Your side business was real estate. You use
Mm-hmm.
skills, and people that listen to this podcast hear me say that everything I do supports everything else I do. And that's strategic. So what you did is took a real set of skills that you had cultivated and deployed it in one avenue. Is that a fair characterization, you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't really plan that getting into it. I didn't realize that was what it would turn into, or that was how it would benefit me. But it really did turn into being, the other thing is the agency I was working for at the time, they specialized in home installed products. So, I mean, I was a resource for them on a lot of stuff. Um,
Right.
and it was very complimentary, both in the project management side of it, but also in the home side of it and the, housing market. It was
Yeah.
really it was not planned at all. It was kind of the pieces fell in the right place for sure.
I always tell people that our pursuits and endeavors, the things that are often the most valuable in our life, tend to start because they're cool.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of seem cool. Oh, that would be cool. Like, how many times you said that? Oh, well, flip houses, high end house. Oh, that would be cool.
Yeah.
Like, and then
And
it's
that's how
like,
everyone will get started in flipping, right? And that's how I did. I mean, that for sure, that's how Dad and I did.
and so I'll steal a phrase from my father. He used to say, "Start where you stand and use what tools you have available until better tools avail themselves." And so, like, you start, you don't know what mistakes you're going to make, and I know we won't get into them, but I know you made plenty, right? As we all do.
Yes.
The saying in the flipping world is, on your first one, if you break even, you should throw a party.
Yeah.
Um, and if you bring it in on budget, you need to retire. On budget and on time, you need to retire, because that's never happened in my career. But so good experience, hard experience, challenging experience. Let's not get into that too much, but let's talk about what happened next, because I think our audience deserves to hear obviously they see the logo, they heard the introduction, they see the logo on the shirt. Um, something some things came along, and you made a change. Tell us
Did.
more about that.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. So in the last podcast, I mean, I think it was Gabe actually who really called me out, and he's like, "So what's holding you back? Are you scared?" Basically. I don't think it was you. I think it was Gabe. But we talked about, you know, why someone that you had on the podcast fairly recently before I did had recently quit their full-time job and gone into real estate full-time. And I said, well, people ask me that all the time about it, but while we had this huge project that wasn't selling, I would have been able to pay my mortgage. And
Yeah.
we talked about the security and everything. So a year later, I was laid off. The company did a few rounds of layoffs, and I was applying to all sorts of jobs. Like I said, I have my project management certification. I am a certified PMP. I have my MBA. I have years of project management experience, both in agencies and with the flip houses. And I was applying to jobs in so many different industries and not getting calls back. And when I got an interview, they're like, "You're way overqualified for this job." I kept a spreadsheet because I'm a project manager. I applied to oversee jobs. I called you and I said,
Yeah.
"Can you go out to lunch and can I pick your brain?" And I asked you if you had any flip projects going that you needed a freelance project manager or designer for. And you said, "I don't. I'll ask around some of my clients, but have you thought about getting a real estate license? You'd be really good at it." And here I am.
Yeah. Well, that happened. It
That one
definitely did. I'm proud to know
was a
that I
little.
wasn't the one. I'm proud to know that I wasn't the one that probed originally in the first
Oh, Dana
episode,
was
because
for sure.
but in fairness, it's what I thought, what I was thinking the entire time we were sitting there recording, right? Was like, this person needs to be a real estate agent. She just doesn't know it yet. And totally understand. And I've had, Brenna, and you can attest to this, I've had numerous, I mean, almost uncountable, conversations with folks surrounding the topic of how do I make the transition into full-time self-employment and still take care of my financial obligations. I bought a house. I have a mortgage. I have student loans. I have car payments. I have kids. I have school tuition. I have all these things, right? And it's funny how these conversations tend to come in bunches because I had that conversation, in fact, with another agent this morning. Um, and the answer to the equation, and I know you know this, and it's taken us a few years to come to this. Um, I know you had faith enough to pull the trigger, even if there was some external stimulus that you wouldn't have asked for. You had the faith and you took the plunge. But the truth is how do you do that? You just do it.
Exactly.
Um, Go ahead.
So we talked in the last episode about, what's holding me back. And I said security. And also at the time, I felt when I got out of grad school and we were flipping, and why didn't we do it full time? I said, because if something happened and flipping was no longer a viable business model for us, I wouldn't have enough on my resume to fall back on to re-enter the workforce. Well, then I found myself employed and not being successful in finding another job. And so it was kind of like it was now or never. Like it was kind of, well, here I am already. It wasn't like I was leaving a job on purpose, like to make this change. Like I was already in a position where I was looking for the next step. And it was kind of, yeah, like I said, now or never, like, well, might as well, and I had friends telling me like, it's about damn time. Like, are you just going to realize that that's what you should do? And honestly, the biggest thing that held me back at that point and was why it took me so long to make the decision was because I felt, I don't know if I've ever told you this, I felt that if what I was going to do was go full-time in real estate, why did I put myself through grad school and getting my PMP? Now, those things are beneficial to me, and we can talk a little bit later about what those things in my previous experience have enabled me to do in full-time real estate. But that was like, why the hell did I do that to myself if this is what I'm going to do? Because I didn't need to do those things to get here. And that was
Right.
my biggest hang up. But then, I mean, you realize the second thing you learn in economics is it's a sunk cost. Like you can't go back and change it. So
Some cost fallacy is phenomenal. In other words, being pot committed,
yeah.
right? Like you're in a hand of poker and you bet 4 rounds and you want to see the river, you're beat, but you pay the extra money, therefore increasing your loss just to know for certain that you would have lost anyway. Sunk cost fallacy is phenomenal. I love so much about what you said there, Brenna. I'll take it back to a moment early on, when you were speaking just a second ago. And I'm not sure if I would have said this, wouldn't be surprised if I did. Certainly have heard myself, these words come out of my mouth multiple times with multiple agents over time. And, it's just that, like I said, you just do it. Right. Well, what if is it's the reality, whether you were laid off or not. Right. And I think knowing what you know now, okay, that you can do this, that you have the skill set, that whether the PMP was what gave you skills you needed, it was all in preparation for the moment where you had to make a decision as to what the rest of your life was going to look like, right? And
Yep.
would you shrink from that challenge or would you rise to it? Right? It seems divine almost in some cases, right?
It's yeah, and the other piece of it that finally kind of gave me the kick in the pants and made me, I guess, overcome, my objection and my, what was holding me back was I'll never forget it. My dad was sitting at my house one afternoon and we were sitting on the couch and I was, he was asking how the job search was going. And he said, and my dad is a person that worked for the same company for 40 something years. So, I mean, that doesn't really happen anymore. But he he asked me what I wanted to be doing in, I don't know if he used 5 years or 10 years, but I said, I don't want to, I said, I don't know what exactly I do want to be doing, but what I don't want to be doing is sitting in an office in some corporate tower, working away towards some corporation's bottom line in the grand scheme of things, making very little difference.
Yeah.
And then I thought, why the hell am I applying to all of these jobs that put me on the path to doing that? And
You know, it,
that was kind of like the like aha, that was kind of it, honestly.
so let's go into that a little more because that resonates with me, and I know obviously more about your story than we'll be able to share today. But I know that your father, who was your business partner in flips, and you
Mm-hmm.
just told us a little bit more about, is influential in your decision making and in your
Mm-hmm.
life. I have
He
very
was not
same
cool, just so
experience.
you know. He actually gave me a really hard time about it. I was
Well, I know that.
pretty upset
I
about
know
it.
that. I do know that. That's actually where I was headed. Um, so I was fortunate in a lot of ways to have a father that was very uncompromising. Okay. This father, demanded a lot of me, right? Um, I lived my childhood to please him, right? To do what I thought he wanted me to do, because no matter how good I did something, it was very tough to reach the level of accomplishment that I felt like was demanded of me. Okay. Now, you'll hear me say I'm a stubborn firstborn and all that, but we are a product of our upbringing. That is absolutely the case. Nature and nurture are also both very true at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
But that may sound domineering or demanding or unfair or whatever, it shaped me. It is what it is, right? That cost is sunk. Regardless of how it got spent, it got spent. He also taught me to demand a lot of myself, to rely upon myself. And like talking about, people don't work for the same company for 40 years anymore. I was taught to never work for someone else's company ever,
Mm.
to rely
Okay.
100% upon myself. You were given quite a different message, right? And I know that your father gave you a little bit of a hard time about making this transition, right? Our industry, especially if you rewind 10 years, um, the public perception of our industry is just slightly above a used car salesman, right? An ambulance chasing attorney. And in some ways that's well deserved, and in some ways it's unfair. So I'm intrigued. When my father told me, as I grew up, as I got out of my adolescent years and into adulthood, the things he told me not to do were just as motivating as the things he commanded or demanded of me when I was much younger. Do you think that your father's hesitancy gave you more of a reason to say yes?
Yes. Oh my God. Yes. It's like, watch me.
What? Okay. I love that because that's almost the attitude you have to have.
I'm redheaded in German.
Napoleon Hill,
Very stubborn.
say that again.
I said I'm redheaded in German. I'm very stubborn.
Okay. You would love the conversation I had with my son. I had to today on the way to school, my son and I discussed. My son is very much like me. He's also very much like my wife at the same time somehow. Which is hilarious and frustrating at the same time. But we had the discussion of the difference between the words persistence, stubbornness, and obstinance.
Well, that's a good one.
It was in a phenomenal conversation, which I'm sure that you and I could probably relate on because I am incredibly stubborn and so is my wife at the same time. So my offspring is like next level. But you know, that's the kind of attitude you need getting in this business, Brenna. You can't have 1 foot in two places, right?
Yeah.
Napoleon Hill said, burn the boats. Okay. Retreat is not an option. When you choose a path, you go all the way. And it's the single greatest issue that most people, now you were fortunate. The decision was somewhat made for you, but you still had to walk the path, right?
I still had to walk
Um,
the path. I still had to, I mean, it was easier for me So you talked about kids, mortgage, car payments, student loans, stuff. I don't have children, so it's just me, which makes it a little bit easier, right? Because I don't have little people depending on me. I do have a dog who, anyways, um, he costs about as much as a kid right now. But yeah, so it's only me. I don't have kids that I had to make sure that I could care for. I did have savings. I had a good paying job, and I was pretty smart with my money, and I did have savings for an emergency, and I used it for what it was intended for. But I still had to pay thousands of dollars for the class, for the exam, for the licensing, for the brokerage fees, for everything. And that was before even going on my first appointment and knowing where my first paycheck was coming from. And that was without income coming in from something else. So and I really think I spoke about that in, I don't know if it was a blog post or something, but it kind of, I guess, gave me the drive and the motivation right out of the gate, because I knew there was a finite end to when I could not pay my mortgage anymore. So it really, I mean, and it's a single income household. I'm not married, so I didn't have another income to at least pay the bills with. So it was sink or swim. But at the time it was now or never, because if I didn't do that, if I didn't go full-time in real estate, how long was it going to be before I, got hired elsewhere? Would I have to move? All of those things. So
Would the same things that have happened pursuing employment for someone else? They could have, depending on how long that gap would have been. I think, Brenna, obviously, and we're going to transition into that because I think it's a great story, and we need to, this is a big part of it. And I want to talk about the whys and the hows and the, how we got here. But, your story is quite inspiring, and we can kind of get into the success that you've had. But that's just it. You had to make that choice, right? You made the choice. You went at it. You did it smart. Nobody does it stupid on purpose, right? But you were extra smart. You were extra prepared, right? You used your skill set to give yourself a pathway towards success. You had measurable benchmarks, right? Things that you wanted to do within certain periods of time, and you stayed on top of it. Okay. All right. Now let's talk about that. You joined this team on August 23rd of 2019. Were you aware of that? Did you know I knew the
I knew
date?
it was right around there. I think I took the test August 22nd. I passed the test August 2nd. I knew that. Yeah.
So we accepted your license on August 23rd of 2019. Okay. So basically the end, of, August leaves you with September, October, November, December, 4 months, a third of a year. In a third of a year, in your very first year, you closed 5 units for 1.2 million in volume. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
5 units for 1.2 million in volume. Your first full year in real estate. Okay. And this was, a pandemic year. Okay. On top of everything, 27 units for 3.25 million. I'm going to give a golf clap on that. But that's not even the most impressive part. Okay. The most impressive
I had
part
12
is
pendings going into COVID. When COVID started, I had 12 pendings.
yeah. And incredible. And obviously that has an impact, and, things happen, and, restarting after COVID was a thing that everyone that was in the industry has had to contend with. We've been incredibly fortunate being in the real estate industry. Many other industries were impacted much more. But there's nothing like running full speed into a brick wall, falling to the ground, and then having to pick yourself up again. And then people tell you to start the race again. So
Yep.
that was 2020. Regardless, we're more fortunate. We're not going to complain, right? We're not the states that said you couldn't sell houses, and real estate has been a beneficiary of the COVID economy, I would say. But 2021, okay, marked improvement. Okay, from a very good first full calendar year. Sitting today on November 17th, Brenna is sitting at 34 closed and pending transactions for 6.8 million in volume. Almost, more than doubling your volume, adding, another 7 units to an already good year, I think is incredible. So I think, Brenna, what the point I want to make to most of our listeners here is it's not all sunshine and rainbows, right? In a relatively short career, coming off of, kind of a big life change, right? Brenna had always thought that this is the lane that she was going to be in. She was doing everything right, as our generation has been taught. You grow up, you get good grades, you go to college, you get a degree, you have a specialty, you find a job, you work hard, you show up, right? You grow and progress, and on top of that, take your lay around time that you could be watching television, and you invest it in a very real venture, okay? And only to have the kind of rug pulled out from under you a little bit, right?
Yep.
But that didn't stop you. And I'm gonna pat you on the back a little bit, so don't blush too hard. But then you had the courage to start something new in what turns out to be a pretty good real estate market, but it wasn't always guaranteed. And 2019, the conversations we were having are, when is the next recession coming?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, we got it for about 3 months of 2020.
Yeah.
A dead stop of the economy. But here we go. I mean, tell me, what is it? What allows you to do that?
What allows me to have the results I've had the last couple
to
years?
endure that and have the results that you've got.
So, and this is kind of a tie-in to where well, this is something I wanted to talk about, and I'm sure you probably had it on your list too. Excuse me, is what the flipping houses on the side previously as a side venture, how that has helped me transition into full-time real estate. And a big piece of that is because of that experience, I came out of the gate and could really, first of all, evaluate houses, whether one thing or another, if this is a home buyer who wants to chance to build some sweat equity, or if there's something that is concerning or whatever. From my opinion, obviously I'm not a structural engineer, I'm not an HVAC person, I'm not a plumber, anything like that, but it gave me the ability to really evaluate houses from the get-go, and also working with investors. And I think the biggest piece of the volume and the transactions I've been able to produce over the past couple of years is because of working with investors, which is something that is really hard for a new agent who doesn't have, in my opinion, who doesn't have a background in real estate. It's something that's really hard for them to do because of the numbers, and how do you estimate a flip, and how do you know if there's a profit here, and how what's your rental rate, and all of this stuff. And I mean that was second nature to me because I'd been doing it for 7 years.
Yeah. I mean, there's certain characteristics, right? I mean, it's been no secret. We evaluate agents on a couple of criteria, right? We want self-starters. Okay. We want problem solvers. We want well-connected or the desire to be. Okay. Good people skills, right? Good, what we call social drive. And we want culture fit, right? Beyond that, if you want to be more specific, having the intimate knowledge of how a home works is infinitely valuable. Okay. Having the confidence to take on a situation is infinitely valuable. When you deal with investors, it's cut and dry. It's not emotional. Okay. Being able to cut to the root of an issue and speak frankly and directly is incredibly important. And your not only your project management background, but your personal investing experience, your social proof, as we call it, right? Like your experiences that you've lived, that you put out in the world, allow you to say, hey, when I ran against that problem, this is how I solved it. Right. And I think all of those are incredibly valuable, but you're right. The investor business, especially in Louisville, and I harp on this week after week, it feels like, on the podcast. If you're a real estate agent in Louisville and you don't know how to manufacture a transaction by evaluating a deal, finding an opportunity, and locating someone with money to purchase that deal, then you're not doing it right. And that's a pretty simple fact. That's how Brenna's been able to close 70 transactions in, little more than 2 years in this business, right? A 35 transaction average on an annual basis is incredible. It's incredible to be able to do those kind of numbers. So anyway, Brenna, we're running a little short on time. I know you and I can talk all day long, right?
Oh yeah.
If we want to keep this going. But I am incredibly grateful to have you as a member of the team and the company. Your leadership, that's another thing we didn't even get into. Brenna has assumed a leadership role here with the team and mentoring younger, lesser experienced agents in a very short period of time. That's an honor that she certainly earned with her hard work. Is there anything else you want to put out there before we close up shop for the day?
We touched on the last episode. This is kind of, tying it back into, other agents who listen and new agents, how, getting started in business, whether or not you came from the background or not. We talked about how I was able to get to the sales that I have very shortly within the first couple of years working with investors. All three of my investors that I have closed multiple deals with. One of them I've closed, I think it's 12 now, 12 deals in a year and a half. He didn't come to me until we did our first deal 4th of July last year. So I've been with him for a year and a half. I've done 12 sales with him, and he has 2 more in progress, 2 renovations in progress, and he's going to keep buying. Another one I've sold 7 properties for. I have an 8th coming up, and then I'm selling his personal home. And another one, he's bought 3 rentals, and he wants to keep going. These were not people in my sphere. One was a realtor.com lead. One was a Zillow lead. One was an Opcity lead. I answered the phone. And then I built trust with them because they saw my background and they knew I was talking about, but I would never have gotten those if I didn't know that they were an investment lead coming in before I answered the phone, before I called that person from a Zillow lead or a realtor.com lead. I had no idea. I didn't know if they were, could put their money where their mouth was. I have no idea. Yeah. I answered the phone. They were not.
Well, go ahead, Brenna. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. That's where. So answer the phone. And then
before you move on, here's what I was going to say. And that this is not just talk, right? And you would think that there's some more high-minded, high-tech way of doing business these days, but she's absolutely right. Brenna mentors an agent on our team that in less than his first 12 months has got 31 closed and pending transactions. And I swear, okay. And it's not perfect because when you do that much business that early in your career, there's, you run up against some issues, right?
There's a learning curve
you got to navigate through. There's always a learning curve. The thing I see most out of this individual is they're in the office more than anybody else. And they reach out to me on a daily basis, asking questions relating to a office call lead. They answer the phone. Mm-hmm. My dad would be so proud to hear me say that. They answer the damn phone. That's what they do. So great advice.
And that really is. And, the referrals are coming from those people now, but I got the business by answering the phone. That's how I got the first transaction out of them. But keeping with it and doing the other things and the intangibles and learning and moving forward in the follow-up and the, acting with integrity and being someone that agent that client can trust. That's why they have kept their business with me, for the past year and a half, and is now trusting me to sell their personal house. I sold them a lot. Oh yeah, I sold them a lot last year. I've sold 7 houses for him. I have another investment coming up. I sold him a lot last year, and I'm getting ready to sell his personal home. So that's 10.
So we like to call that a force multiplier. Meeting one source and doing multiple transactions over the course of a year or many years is called a force multiplier. It's incredible. And you got the leads originally from another force multiplier, which is online leads and different online lead sources. So conversion works, nurturing works. You build your business until your business supports you on its own. So Brenna, unfortunately, that's all the time we got for today. If you want to find Brenna, you can find her on any of the social channels. Brenna, why don't you give us a little, give us your Instagram handle or whatever you'd like people to go and check out.
Yeah. So also proudest moment, that got me the honor of the lowest sales price ever in the entire brokerage. I just want to shout that out because I think that's still the one I'm most proud of.
3
$1,000.
figures, right? Oh,
1,000.
4 figures.
Yeah.
Somebody's going to go $9.99 soon and knock you off that top spot.
$14.25 in commission. I just want to throw that out there. But yes,
that'll get your picture on Shelbyville Road nowadays.
Right. Yeah, I got that award a few months, but that annual award, yeah, and that lowest record, that I'm still proud of that. So yeah, Instagram and Facebook is at Brenlow Properties, BRENLOW Properties, BrenlowProperties.com, and then also an ebook. Set up and flip a house already, a guide to help you shit or get off the pot with my co-author Wendy Doris, and that is also available on BrenlowProperties.com.
Very, very cool. So glad you could join us today, Brenna. We'll have to reboot this again in the future. Go a couple more years, and then you're selling like 20 mil a year, and tell everybody how that is. Folks, we appreciate you joining in for the podcast this week. Always try to bring you, a compelling guest that tell the story about real estate, talk about what's going on in Louisville real estate. As a reminder, you can find us on all the socials, the Resource Podcast on Facebook. I forgot to say earlier, but our private Facebook group where we are streaming live now, Resource Real Talk about Louisville real estate. Send us a request. We'll get you on there at J_Pitts on TikTok, at J Pitts Realtor on Instagram, at JTPA Louisville on Twitter. Full episodes on youtube.com/JPittsRealtor. Don't forget our sister piece of content, JTP University, 5-minute episodes, tactical. They're in the feed on Apple Podcasts and Spotify or wherever you podcast. Don't forget to give us a 5-star review and a follow. It helps the show get in front of more people. We appreciate you immensely. Brenna, thank you again for joining us for Resource Real Talk about Louisville real estate. I'm your host, Jay Pitts. We'll see you next week.